Hey folks, as you're joining today's 2022 HFA MLK Servathon event, Breaking Generational Cycles with Destiny Helpers outreach, I'd love for you all to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, preferred pronouns, city, favorite food. Let's just get to know each other as we work through this session. I'll verbally just let you all know that I'm Stephanie. I'm the Director of Strategic Volunteer Initiatives at Hunger Free America. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Workshop technically starts at 5:15. So as we're waiting for other folks to join, again, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Awesome, Christopher. Thanks for joining Pizza. It's tough. I'm joining you from Staten Island, New York, and we definitely like our pizza around here.
Yep, I used to live over there myself.
Oh, nice. Okay, folks, as you're joining, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Welcome to Breaking Generational Cycles. We're just getting started by introducing ourselves in the chat. And we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Jo, does it look like folks have pretty much joined from the waiting room?
Yes, it does. Little by little.
Okay, great. Awesome. Oh, French onion soup. That's great, especially given today's weather. Tampa by way of Weehawken, Weehawken, New Jersey? Or is that also in Florida? So Lisa. New Jersey, yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. Very nice. Trudy and I'm going to come over for lunch at your place. You have to tell me some of the favorite places for ackee and saltfish. Perfect. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I know that we just have 1 hour for this session. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. For attending. This is Food Justice is Breaking Generational Cycles with Destiny Helpers Outreach. So I am Stephanie Winter. I am the Director of Strategic Volunteer Initiatives for Hunger Free America. We are going to begin this session with a land acknowledgement. I am speaking from the physical space of New York City, and I would like to acknowledge the land on which I currently reside, which historically was that of the Lenape, Canarsie, Rockaway, and Wappinger Indigenous peoples. We deliver a land acknowledgement to acknowledge the historical legacy of colonialism, and by honoring and paying respect to the land, which was taken by conquest, along with the domination of the people who inhabited the land and the imposition of white supremacy. We do it to raise greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights, and as a small step toward equitable relationship and reparation. We encourage the participants on today's call to privately acknowledge the land that sustains and supports you. And if you do not already know your area's history, we have provided a link in the chat to learn more about the Indigenous peoples that live or have lived in your area. So welcome. So thank you again for joining us today. If you're new to Hunger Free America, HFA is a nonpartisan national nonprofit building the movement to enact the policies and programs needed to end domestic hunger and assure that all Americans have sufficient access to nutritious food. We do this both through our direct service and advocacy work, both of which we feel strengthen each other. At HFA, as I noted, I am the Director of Strategic Volunteer Initiatives, so my work really centers around engaging community members, individuals, organizations in capacity building volunteer work, really wanting to help folks have meaningful experiences that address the root causes of hunger. We really hope that by deepening that relationship between volunteer and organization, that we help you connect to the root causes of hunger and really encourage you to join us as anti-hunger champions in the future. HFA's work to end hunger continues to be vital. And there's no denying that hunger and food insecurity swelled during the pandemic, with estimates of over 50 million individuals being affected during the height of the crisis, and that food insecurity was a problem before the health and economic crisis. However, according to recent research published by HFA, the United States was able to alleviate some of the greatest impacts with increased and expanded federal food and cash aid, seeing a 38% drop in food insufficiency when these programs were deployed. The positive impact these programs have on reducing hunger and poverty really illustrate the power of policy choices and why HFA's work and our collective work as advocates is so important. We must also make space to acknowledge the continued racial disparity in domestic hunger. While all types of low-income families are suffering, data shows that people of color are disproportionately impacted at higher rates. Research from the USDA shows that in 2020, just under 22% of Black respondent households experienced food insecurity, as did over 17% of Hispanic respondent households. This is in contrast to around 7% of white respondent households. And as the global pandemic and demands for racial justice continue to be heard, we must continue to uplift MLK's message of justice. For over 15 years, Hunger Free America has honored Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy by coordinating service events and volunteer actions supporting long-term solutions to hunger. We hope that volunteers here today will learn something new, take action in the fight against hunger, as well as take away some new ideas on how to continue working towards and supporting a more equitable community. Now, as we start the workshop, I'd like to just give a little framing on some norms, and we'd like to introduce them as we frame our dialogue. So first one is a safe space is a brave space. We're called to create a brave space where we accept the likelihood that we will be uncomfortable when investigating issues of race, privilege, and oppression and our roles within them. Work to recognize your privileges. Use this space to recognize and investigate your privileges. For example, class, gender, sexual orientation, ability. Honor these different experiences we all bring to this space. Take risks, lean into the discomfort. We're all in a process, and challenge yourself to contribute, even if it's not perfectly formulated. To that end, actively listen. Use your energy to listen to what is being said before thinking about how to respond. And notice when defensiveness or denial may arise. If anyone has any additional norms to add, please, we welcome them in the chat to add context to how we're going to move forward in this workshop. Great. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our co-host, Trudy Ann Williams, who is the founder and CEO of Destiny Helpers Outreach.
Good afternoon, everyone. Stephanie, are you gonna do the bio or you want me to just jump right in?
I'd love for you to just share your story and your journey. It's always great to hear directly from you. Do you want me to?
No, that's fine. I'll do it. That's not a problem. So hello, everyone. I want to thank everyone for taking the time out today to be a part of this workshop. This is a very serious conversation, and I'm happy that you could have found the time to really engage in this conversation, and hopefully we'll find some strategic ways as to how we can move forward. But before we go any further, Let me introduce myself to you and let you know who I am. So I'm Trudy Ann Williams. I'm the founder and CEO of Destiny Helpers Outreach, Inc. And just a little bit of backstory on my life. I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Jamaica. And I moved to New York when I was about 20, 21 years of age. And I've been here, and ever since I know myself, I've been just a person who loves to do community work, love to impart on younger folks, at-risk youth, especially because I'm coming from a community where that is very it's very prevalent. So I tend to love to reach out and to help. I've also been homeless. So I do work a lot with families who live in the shelter system. And what I do, you'll see as I dive into the work that Destiny Helpers do, that it's very, very multi-layered. So without further ado, let's start the presentation. You could go ahead, Jay, and start presenting the slides. So I want to thank Hunger Free America for this partnership that they have with Destiny Helpers Outreach, Inc., and to all the volunteer initiatives that they have provided to us. We're very grateful. They have definitely helped us with our strategic development. So I want to acknowledge that partnership today, and thank you for opening the space for me to share on intergenerational poverty. Next slide. So today in particular, we're looking at food justice and breaking generational cycles. So if you're wondering who Destiny Helpers is, we are a 501c3 organization. We were formed back in April of 2019, and we're based in Brooklyn, New York. When we started, really, we were just hoping to have a pageant for teenage girls, but our mission quickly evolved. And so you can move on to the next slide for sure. So our mission here at Destiny Helpers Outreach, Inc. is to support at-risk youth and families living in underserved communities worldwide through education and training, social and recreational programs, and or leadership to improve their lives. Our end game here is to just become one of the world-renowned not-for-profit community-based organizations that creates meaningful youth and family-oriented programs that will definitely see a positive change and transformation in the lives and the communities of the people that we serve. We believe that, there are certain core principles that are necessary, and we have 5 as an organization, or 5 core values are integrity, being trustworthy, being transparent, being accountable, and ensuring that, everything is above board and everyone is equally treated. So those are things that we pride ourselves on. You can move to the next slide. This way, right? All right, so why do we do what we do? We believe that we're a beacon of positive change and transformation, and we want to chart the way forward to social development through education, sport, and the arts. We see education as an avenue for upward social mobility and sustainable development, and we understand that sport can be very powerful, and so we intend to use it as a force to encourage communal unity. We also see the arts as something very important because it is a medium of expressing and fostering the creativity of at-risk youth and families living in underserved communities. So the big question, what do we do, right? So we go out into the communities such as Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, Flatbush. We've even been into Staten Island on the North Shore, and we've been in the Bronx and the Lower East Side, Manhattan, where we go in and we do programs that really teach individuals not just about the importance of having a conventional education, but we want to couple that with life skills. And so we teach them about personal hygiene, their anatomy, their reproductive health. We educate individuals about safe sex practices, such as the proper use of various contraceptives, STDs, STIs, and in an effort to empower individuals to reach their highest potential, we host capacity building workshops that focuses on financial literacy, SMART goals, etiquette, and building self-esteem. And we hope in the future to start hosting skill training seminars that will help to prepare individuals for job interviews, as well as preparing them for the workforce. Separate and apart from all those programmings that we offer direct services. So we provide food, clothing, school supplies to the homeless a lot, and we also send those donations back to the Caribbean. We have sent to Trinidad, we've sent to Jamaica, we've supported the Haitian community, and we're looking this month to support the Kenya family. So we'll be sending clothing and food and school supplies to Kenya with one of our local community partners. So that's the work that we do. And if you would like more information about the organization, you can definitely follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, or you can visit our website. And if you want to have a more direct contact with the organization, you could reach out to us via email or via phone. And that phone number, it's a WhatsApp, text, and call number. So you can reach out to us in multiple ways. So before we go any further, I would love for us to play a game, a little icebreaker, just to check, just how much persons understand how dire the poverty situation is here in the United States. It's a Kahoot game, and if I'm able to share my screen, I would like to do so at this time. Am I able to do that now, Jay? Okay, great. All right. So, let me go here. Share. So if you have another device, you could go on that device and you could go to Kahoots.com, and I'm giving you guys the game pin, and you will enter this game pin. Let me see if I could copy the link and drop it in the chat to make it easier for everyone. Nice. Okay. Okay. Is that everyone who intends to play the game? Just give me like a thumbs up so I could know that I could start. All right, so I'm gonna start the game. Is that okay? Should I go ahead and start? Stephanie, do you think I should give it another minute?
Yeah,
or-
is there anybody who would like to join that's having any difficulties joining? Just let us know so we can hold off and give you some time to get in. But if not, seems like perhaps this is who would like to participate.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start. All right, so 6 persons got the correct answer. That's great. So the answer is true. If every person in the US living in poverty lived in the same state, that state's population would be greater than any other state. So that's how many people are living in poverty. All right, next question. So let me see the scoreboard. So Julina is ahead. Guys, you got to be quick. All right, so 6 persons got it correct. We're going good. Let me see who's ahead in the leaderboard. Denise, Kendra, Eric, y'all showed up in this question. Jay, come on. Stephanie, where you at?
Oh, oops.
Okay, so it looks like 9 persons. Do we have 9 persons in the game now? Okay, so the correct answer is requirements to list felony convictions on the job application. Let's see. Denise, you're still ahead in the leaderboard. Kendra, you're still up there. All right. Next question. All right, so the correct answer is advocating for worker rights. Denise, you holding that spot.
For those that don't know Denise, Denise is very competitive as well as being very intelligent and knows a lot about this topic.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies, but it's a fun game.
I know. Right, so majority got the correct answer, Mississippi. All right, Kendra, I like that. You took over. Nice.
Good job, Kendra.
All right, so women are unfortunately the group that has more living in poverty. Kendra, you still going good. Denise, you have a streak with 6 correct answers in a row. You going good too, girl.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, only one person got this question correct. The current federal poverty line for a family of 4 in the United States of America is $24,563. Jay, come through. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Last question, guys. Okay, so the family that is making less than half the poverty threshold, that is what it means when we say a family is living in deep poverty. Let's see who gets crowned. Christopher, you're in third place. Denise, you kept second. And the trophy goes to Jay. Okay, runners up, Mary and Kendra. Good job, everybody. That was a great job. So that just gives you guys a little idea of exactly what the hunger and the poverty situation is in the United States of America. Now let us have like a discussion. I want to hear from you guys. We're going to talk about the first question where it spoke to if every person in the US who is living in poverty resided in the same state, the state would have a greater population than any other state. The correct answer was true. Not only would it have a higher population than Texas, and we know Texas is a big state, it would be more populous than Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, and Alaska combined. That's a whopping 39,783,209 people. And the source that I got this from was the, and I'm gonna drop the, I think I could drop these links in the chat where I got that, the answers from, but trust me, it is serious out here what's going on. Jay, you could go ahead and reshare the PowerPoint presentation. So that's where the information for that first question came from. And then the second question was, what percentage of people living, no, yeah, that was the second question. Yeah, what percentage of people living near or below the poverty line do not have health insurance? 11.7% of Americans under the age of 65 did not have health insurance at any time in 2016. Not being able to access or afford health insurance puts families and individuals at greater risk of sinking further into poverty because they must pay for necessary medical treatment on their own without the benefits of insurance. The next question was, what is one significant challenge formerly incarcerated men and women face when seeking employment? So the US prison system is largely populated with persons who have committed non-violent crimes. Yes, that's true. For example, possession of certain types of illegal drugs is a felony in many states. Once people serve their sentences and satisfy all the conditions of their release, these returning citizens encounter significant obstacles. One of those is finding steady employment due to previous felony convictions. And you can learn more about that through different re-entry programs that are happening across the nation. One such program is The Exodus Transitional Communities, they have a very big reentry program. They provide, transitional housing services and all types of services for individuals who are coming home. The next question was, which of the following activities addresses a root cause of poverty? Advocating for rights of workers, including livable wages, is one way we can help to address the root causes of poverty. This is one way of changing systems and structures that prevent opportunities for people to get out of poverty. Such an approach goes beyond acts of charity, example, donating food or money to respond to the immediate needs of families in poverty. So while we want persons to donate to charities and you volunteer at homeless shelters and doing all of that, really until we have great change in terms of how the system is set up, then, people will continue to live in poverty. Then we want to look at the next question, which was, which state has the highest poverty rate? So right now, it's Mississippi. In 2016, Mississippi had a staggering 20.3% poverty rate, with a statewide median household of income of $41,754. Anti-poverty programs helped 20.8% of Mississippians stay above the poverty line, while 10.1% of people still fell deep, very deep into poverty. The next question is, are there more men or women living in poverty? Unfortunately, more women, 16.3% of women live in poverty, while only 13.8% of men do. Although women are making huge strides in our country, they are still greatly impacted by poverty. In fact, 26.6% of single moms live in poverty. That's more than 1 in every 4 single moms. That is serious, guys. What is the current federal poverty line for a family of 4? So this country, the United States of America, is purporting that $24,563,000 per year is supposed to be enough money for a family of 4 to meet its basic needs, such as food, housing, clothing, healthcare, and transportation. If you guys, if anyone earns below that threshold, they're considered to be living in poverty. So a full-time worker at a federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour makes $15,080 per year, significantly below the federal poverty line for a family of 4. And I believe in New York, the minimum wage is $15. If you know the rate for your state, you could drop that in the chat so that we could have that information as well. And then what does it mean for a family to live in deep poverty? A family is living in deep poverty if they earn less than half of the poverty threshold. For a family of 4, $24,563 is considered the federal poverty line. Therefore, the family would be living in deep poverty if they made less than $12,000, $281 in a year. In 2016, 21.3 million Americans were living in deep poverty with incomes below 50% of the poverty threshold. So that's just our debrief on the game that we just played. Does anyone have any questions so far? Any questions so far? No questions? We can move on. All right, so the next slide is So we want to look at what is poverty. That's where we're at right now. What is poverty? I want to hear from a few persons. What is poverty? You can unmute yourself and just tell me briefly what you think poverty is. Does anyone know?
This is a safe space and a brave space.
Yes, it is. It's a conversation that we want to have. So if you guys can read, yes.
Maybe someone or a group of people who are homeless or just not able to sustain an income.
So poverty, it's really, it's being in a state or condition where a person or a community lacks the financial resources and the very essential things that are necessary to maintain a minimum standard of living. So it's simply not having money to pay for one's basic needs, like your rent, your utilities, your healthcare, your food, and even hygiene products, right? So that's what poverty is. But then what is intergenerational poverty? Does anybody know what intergenerational poverty is? Do you have any idea what you think that would mean?
I think of it as having two dimensions. One is poverty that affects multiple generations of people, and poverty that is inherited and transmitted between generations of people.
So that is two very great observations on your part. So intergenerational poverty is also known as the cycle of poverty. And this is something that moves from one generation, it persists from one generation to the next. So if I was born poor or in poverty, in order for it to be considered a generational poverty, it means that I would have grown up poor, I stayed poor, had a child of my own, and that child too had to live in poverty. So that's what it means to be going from generation to generation. You are born in it, and your children come, they're born in it, their children come, and they're born in it, and it goes on and on. Who does it impact? So statistics show that minority and poor communities are disproportionately impacted by intergenerational poverty, right? They face system-wide barriers that often trap families in poverty from multiple generations. As we go through this presentation, we're going to look at what are some of those system-wide barriers that families face, why they have it going in their family for generations. And then why does this matter? It matters because too many in poverty are trapped by a system built to address situational poverty. And when we talk about situational poverty, we're talking about, okay, somebody comes up with a job creation program. Okay, it's immediately helps persons to gain an income, but does it really solve their poverty problem? Because the jobs that they may be able to get through this program, it's not jobs that are going to have them necessarily making above minimum wage. So they're still making barely enough to survive on a monthly basis. So the income versus what they need in order to pay for their housing and, you know, everything that they need on a day-to-day basis, it still does not work out for them. So they're working basically to pay bills. So they don't have money to necessarily take a vacation or pay for some surgery that they may need. They still might not get all the necessary services because now you know, if you make over a certain amount in certain states, then you're not qualified to get public assistance. You're not able to get welfare, you know, so working does not mean that a person is not going to be in poverty, because a lot of persons are working, but they're still living in poverty. Let's look at some of the contributing factors. Does anybody know what redlining is? Does anybody know what that is? No?
It's the practice of real estate professionals in openly prohibiting the provision of mortgages and homeowner support for particular neighborhoods.
Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Thank you for that. So redlining is something that it started back like in the 1930s in the United States, right? And it created a new wave of poverty when the Federal Home Administration divided cities into categories and they labeled them minority dominant regions, unfit or unsafe for mortgages. And they refused to allow minorities to live in any other type of city. As a result, low-income white people and many minorities were forced to grow up in areas with low equity, less infrastructure, and virtually no home ownership. So since all these economists, they came together and they consider home ownership to be one of the most consequential method for building both personal and intergenerational wealth, because, you know, it's just like owning an asset. Once you own a home, your family, your children could come and inherit that home, so they won't fall into that bracket of persons trying to rent somewhere and not being able to afford it and all that kind of thing. So redlining is still playing a role in modern day intergenerational poverty in the United States, because those who were refused mortgages from 1930 to like 1968 were not able to pass that estate on to their next generation, which increases the wealth gap and perpetuates poverty. So in 1930, you had redlining put into law under Franklin D. Roosevelt, right? The New Deal program. And then you go to 1980, and 6 in 10 redline areas still lived in poverty, like so many years later, and those areas still were in very high poverty. And then we moved to the 2000s, and the number of high poverty neighborhoods went up to 4,783. When we go to 2010, the number of high poverty neighborhoods, it went up even more to 6,489, massive increase due to the recession that happened. And then in 2012, we had the poverty rate at 15.1% of the 46.2 million people in poverty. 15 million of them are children. Did you just hear that? So you have 46.2% million people living in poverty. And out of that 46.2 million people living in poverty, 15 million of them are children. In 2017, residents of redline areas has mostly shifted to the majority Latino or white areas, no longer a Black majority, right? So you find that there are shifts happening because of gentrification and other developments that are happening in these cities. So like, let's look at Brooklyn, right? Bed-Stuy, it used to be a space where a lot of disadvantaged persons or persons who need low income housing could go there and say, yes, I could live there. A Crown Heights, a Brownsville, you know, but now with gentrification, they're knocking down the affordable housing and they're putting up these newly highly sophisticated buildings, but who can afford it? Certainly not low income persons, certainly not persons who are living in poverty or living at or just a little above the poverty line, because you work a job and you're paid $15 an hour, right? And your rent alone on a monthly basis is $1,500. You do the math, more than 50% of that person's monthly income is gonna go to their rent. We're not talking about them buying food. We're not talking about them getting access to healthcare. We're not talking about them buying clothing. We're not talking about healthcare. We're not talking about anything else but rent right now. We're not even talking about utilities, having a phone, having Wi-Fi. You know, it's just like so hard for individuals, even though there's so many things put in place by the system, really, like, we're still not able to afford much. And so this is why poverty continues to be rampant across the United States. And then when we look in 2020, 1 in every 4 Black, 1 in every 6 Hispanic, and 1 in every 13 white Americans live in high poverty redlined areas. So you see how it is. 1 in every 4 versus 1 in every 13 white. 1 in every 4 versus 1 in every 6 Hispanic. So we see why we're telling people that the minorities in this country are having a really hard time. And why do you think some of these people are having a very hard time? What are some of the things that that you think contributes to some of these families having such great difficulties? Anyone want to tackle the question?
Well, there are a
Maybe
ton of things I can think of.
Okay. All right, let's hear the ton of things.
Okay, so the first thing is, once these neighborhoods have fallen into this feature of continual circulating poverty, very few external businesses want to do business in such place. So the investment needed to bring in, for instance, services or jobs or things of that nature, there is no incentive for most corporations to really provide that type of wraparound economy building in those types of communities. And so what you have and then are then communities that have no services, which would have provided good jobs or opportunities for people to develop capital. So it's become somewhat self-perpetuating on one hand.
So true. Thank you so much for sharing. Julina, your hand is raised. You could go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I want to add to what was just said. I feel like in terms of the lack of social capital, I think the wage gap plays a huge role, like you just said, as well as lack of resources and education. So like you listed it here, school system failures. Schools in Brownsville, like you said, for example, East New York, Harlem, they're not getting the same resources or access thereof compared to schools that might be in Park Slope or in Soho. So these things, we talk about intergenerational, they play a role because now the generation that is coming up, they're getting a lack of access and resources that could help them propel forward as they age and grow.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And we're going to do a deeper dive into the school system failures. Like, this is very personal to me right now because a really great school, Ivy Hill Prep in East Flatbush, it was opened in 2019 and my son started going there in 2020. And it gave me hope that a community like East Flatbush got a really great opportunity to see children receive high quality education. They receive, their curriculum is great. The resources were coming in and, you know, they got martial arts as a part of their curriculum. They had art, they had dance, and just how instruction was provided to them, you know, was great. And here comes a board that says, well, we don't like the way the head of school is running things. And we don't think that so much money should be invested in probably a Chromebook or a headphone for a scholar. And so they took the head of school out, the founding head of school out. And it just leads to a myriad of other things because now the culture in the school has changed. In a charter school, they have, just for enrolling your child, that school receives like $16,500 just for enrollment. In a normal public school, they're not even receiving half of that for one child. So you can see how the money does not equate. And then if the money doesn't equate, then that school can't afford to get the resources that a Park Slope school or a school that is getting much more funding could afford, right? The instruction won't be great. The curriculum, it's designed one way, and not all children learn the same way. Boys and girls learn differently. And, in a normal school environment, I think it's like the education system, it's just so geared toward the way girls learn as opposed to boys. Because I have a boy. And so, I'm learning about the different ways that he learns. So boys tend to not want to sit in front of a computer or sit in a class for an extended because they have a higher level of energy, right? And so they're often thought of as being disruptive, or they have ADHD, or some kind of learning disability or developmental disability, right? And they label our children and then they put them to a side and throw them in a barrel and say, you guys don't sit in front of a desk and chair and write and read and do things in this way, so you cannot be considered to be reaching all the goals that you need to reach, right? And so we have that issue where the way the school system is set up, it is basically setting our children up to fail. And then receiving a quality education provides skills and experiences that are necessary to have greater future financial opportunities, which in turn enable people to escape poverty. So one of the factors that acts as a barrier to children getting the needed education to escape poverty is a lack of early childhood intervention on the part of the school system. So many children who grow up in poverty experience delayed brain development due to poor nutrition and less mental stimulation, among other factors. This delayed development can contribute to less than half of impoverished kids being ready for kindergarten. Studies show that additional resources or attention to the students who are in need can often ameliorate the problem. A study that I was looking at found that even a $1,000 raise in a household's annual income could result in a 6% increase in math and reading scores. However, most low-income households cannot afford to pay for extra educational support for their children. Since this early education intervention is largely unattainable for those in poverty, a gap in literacy levels and test scores begin to be observable in kindergarten for many students. In cases where this problem is not addressed, the child may continue to fall behind in his or her peers and fail to complete his or her education. For instance, research demonstrates that if a child is not a proficient reader by the time he or she is in the 3rd grade, the child is 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. Without having a mentor or special attention given to a student in need before he or she is 8 or 9 years old, the student is not likely to stay in school, with many students feeling as though the school system failed them. So in truth and in fact, 1 in every 10 students from low-income families drop out of high schools, but only 1 in 100 from higher income families do the same. This trend is significant because graduating from high school or obtaining a GED is one of 3 factors that has a 98% success rate for helping an individual to attain middle-class status or at least move out of poverty. What do you guys think about that? What are your thoughts on that? So our children are in school, but because there's a lack of resources based on how the school system is set up, at a certain age, at a certain time, or kids just give up, families give up. They're like, you know what? You could go find a menial job and help pay some bills in the house so that we could try to survive and live. How do we feel about that? Julina, you could go ahead and speak if your hand is raised, or if that's from previous, we could lower that hand. I think it has been raised. So we can lower her hand. Does anyone want to chime in on the school system? Are there any parents on here who want to weigh in on the failure of our school system?
I can speak from my personal experience. I actually grew up a significant portion of my life in poverty. I think my mother was always very acutely aware of the shortcomings of the public school system. And so from her particular position, she had the education and the ambition on her own to supplement what I was learning in the public school system. And she had the time to do this. So where she saw that school curriculum was not going to encourage critical thinking or encourage success, she personally stepped in and had, again, the education, the time, and the wherewithal to do that for me. But I knew of dozens of classmates who did not have that situation at home, who did not necessarily have a mother who had the education, the time, or the ambition. And for that reason, were much less likely to be successful attending the same exact school that I was, despite having the same circumstances. So if we really want children in these communities to be successful, the normative situation is that we know that those schools are not enough. We can either advocate to reform the schools, to have a more equitable distribution of resources, dollars, personnel, even the quality of teachers that these schools are receiving. And while we're doing that, we also have to look at ways that we can supplement what children are receiving, because a lot of the learning that I happened to obtain just in my own life was outside of the classroom, knowing that the amount of quality education I was getting in school was quite limited. Again, that's a choice and a decision that people who already have a lack of resources would have to be willing to make. People would have to be willing to play the long game. And unfortunately, when you're surviving hand to mouth, that's just not a conclusion a lot of people can come to on their own. And it's very difficult.
Absolutely. And you brought up something very important. Not your mother had the ability to supplement whatever you weren't receiving at school because she had the time. But, you know, many persons who live in poverty, the reality is, like the statistics show, it's a lot of single woman-led households. The men are either imprisoned, they're just absentee fathers, or we don't know what's going on with them, and they're not playing an active role in the child's life. So we have a lot of single mothers, a lot of single woman households. And these women are breaking their backs every single day to go out to work. So, you know, they do a lot of home health aid jobs, which could have them away from the home for very long periods of time. So, you know, you come home after taking care of somebody else, you're so beat, you're like, listen, I'm tired. I don't even have the time. I'm not even as educated, so I don't even know how to answer your questions. I don't know how to help you. I don't have the time to take you to the library because I'm so focused on providing everything else so that we have a roof above our head, clothes on our back, shoes on our feet, food on our table, that everything else just gets pushed to the sideline. Like, and then, you know, we talk about the nutrition. If a child is not properly nourished when they go to school, they're not going to be focused enough to learn anything, to really soak up anything, because they're worried about, oh, when I go home? Will I have dinner? Will mom be there? Will dad be there? Will this happen? Will that happen? You know, it's just a lot. Julina, I see your hand raised, so you could go ahead, unmute yourself and chime in, honey.
Yes, I stepped away for a second, but I was able to hear the conversation. So I'm actually currently working in a New York City public school, and my role is combating absenteeism, and it actually aligns with what we're talking about now. One trend that I'm noticing is that a lot of the students and families are not getting enough mental health support. So you have students who might have certain disorders, but they need more support in and without and out of school, as well as parents. And we also see the financial support. Most of the homework that they have now is done on like Google Classroom or on these online platforms. If they're going to a home that doesn't have Wi-Fi, doesn't have internet, they cannot complete the work. And if they're failing out of school, by the time they're like juniors or seniors in high school, they don't feel compelled to come anymore because they don't have the access to complete the work anyhow. So a lot of it looks like them not showing up to school, not because they don't want to, because they can't.
Absolutely, absolutely, girl. It's hard out here in these New York schools. I'm going through it as a mother of a 6-year-old boy. I'm currently having to like search high and low to find a really good school. So if you could recommend a really great school in Brooklyn that I could send him to, I'd be happy to have those suggestions sent over to me. I would greatly appreciate that. Is there any other parent on the line that wants to talk about the school system failures? What has your experience been when it comes down to school systems?
So I'll speak. I'm a parent and new to the public school systems. This is Stephanie. I didn't want to take up too much of the time. But I do think, you know, as I'm navigating the public, I'm a product of public schools here in New York City. I very much appreciated my education. I think it both offered me and I fought for opportunity within the system. But what I think I'm seeing is, just from my perspective, and this is again the safe space and uninformed thoughts, but you know, I think New York City specifically has tried and add more equity or lay, you know, some more even ground with, you know, opening up, you know, districts as for instance, right? So rather than having zone schools, you are looking to apply for schools that may be out of your zone that are seen as more, you know, like more advantageous in terms of resources or community and who's, but I think that really leaves out, you know, and almost sometimes exacerbates these problems of which schools are getting left behind perhaps. And then also, you know, not taking into consideration, you know, perhaps challenges families may have in practicality and trying to get their child to another school in a different district or a different zone. So it's pretty complex as I'm trying to, and even just knowing what is considered a, you know, quote unquote good school versus, you know, perhaps a more challenging school. It's tough to see in terms of like that evaluation. And, you know, I think particularly I can only speak to New York City, you know, looking at what those evaluation statistics are, you know, navigating the school system website and trying to see what that feedback is. It's pretty tough. And I think, you know, folks are just really trying to invest in their children. And, you know, this could bring out the larger conversation around charter schools and, you know, how those add complexity to, you know, trying to add equity again to the system. And, you know, everybody is just really trying to do best by their child mostly, right? And so you want what is the most advantageous for your child. But at the same time, you know, looking at the broader spectrum as well, I think it's pretty complex whether when you're looking at individuality, you know, your personal concern, and then the broader concern of community as well. So it's not a formed thought, but it's just some of my experiences and some thoughts I have on navigating this with my young 4-year-old.
Thank you so much for sharing, Stephanie. So, you know, we're talking about it on the early childhood level and the elementary level and the secondary level, but the problem it continues, right? It's not unique to secondary education, as there have also been similar trends throughout post-secondary education. So only 11% of low-income first-generation college students who enroll in a four-year institution earn their degrees within 6 years, while 55% of their higher income peers do. This trend reveals that even after overcoming initial barriers to attending college, a student who comes from poverty is 5 times more likely to drop out of college due to financial, social, or other personal reasons, right? And we know the importance that a post-secondary degree have. It's a powerful way to get out of poverty because it increases one's earning potential. Because when you just have a basic high school diploma or a GED, you're only considered for entry-level jobs. But in order to get like a real like skilled job, like as a welder, you would need to go to trade school and obtain certification in order to get that. If you want to become a financial banker or an accountant or anything of that nature, your high school diploma will not help you, right? So you need that tertiary level education to even get just a simple job that's really not paying that much, but at least you have a greater earning opportunity, right? So as a reference, those who only have a high school diploma make 62% of what someone with a bachelor degree earns. So people who do not have the opportunity or means to go to college, or those who end up dropping out of college, they face extreme difficulty when trying to make a comfortable living, as they must compete against others who hold college degrees. Therefore, the problem of this cycle of poverty starts the first day of kindergarten and has the potential to affect a child's entire life, since a child who is struggling academically is statistically more likely to drop out of high school and even less likely to attain a college degree. And then we're going to move to lack of social capital. Does anybody know what social capital is?
To me, it's very broadly defined. The social capital represents the sum of all of our networks, connections, and intangible wealth that we have in order to translate these intangible aspects into tangible things that we use to advance ourselves and our families.
Perfect definition. So so social capital is a powerful tool to help an individual rise out of extreme poverty, right? So like was just mentioned, social capital is like an asset, not just having more connections, but having connections that benefits a person. So these connections often enhance the financial, social, and even emotional aspect of an individual's life. So having a large number of deep and lasting connections actually increases fulfillment and overall happiness. Social capital allows an individual to utilize other skills and resources, such as asking a relative or neighbor to help with one's taxes free of charge, because every little dollar adds up. So there was a study conducted in a low-income New York suburbs, and the findings of that found that characteristics of an area instead of individual factors act as a barrier to different types of social capital, right? So when you have strong relationship ties with family or friends, bridging, meaning exchange of material or emotional resource from outside of one's immediate group, and linking capital, valuable connections to other organizations and formal networks such as nonprofits outside of one's neighborhood, right? So this study found that although some residents in lower income areas have connections, these connections are not dense, right? So overall, linking capital to an organization that can provide prolonged assistance is the weakest of all types, right? So not because they know off means that they're getting the support that they need. And so like even in a Brownsville where Destiny Helpers does a lot of its work, there are a lot of community-based organizations. There are a lot of nonprofits. There are a lot of churches. There are a lot of businesses in these communities. But guess what? The level of poverty is still high. Why? Because people, and this is out of studies, like a lot of I think the Georgia Center for Research, they did a study and it showed that people who are actually in poverty, majority of them, 9 out of 10, they do not think that they are in poverty. They do not think that they have a problem. Right. And so nonprofits and organizations and individuals who can help, we can't just go into these communities and say, listen, I'm here to help you. I'm here to do this or that. We can't run in and take over the space of these people because in the first place, they don't even think that they have a problem. So how do you help someone who doesn't even acknowledge that they are in need of help? That's a question I'm posing to the group. How can we help persons who doesn't even acknowledge the fact that they are experiencing poverty?
You know, I've been stuck with that question for quite a long time now, even in my own career. I find it, and I certainly don't want to speak for anyone else, I find it very difficult to connect with individuals who don't necessarily see a problem with the way they live, or they don't view it as problematic, because then you're in the position of trying to explain to such individuals why the way that someone's living is problematic. And at the same time, you need to cultivate self-esteem within the person that you're talking to. You don't want to be in the position of saying, well, you know, based on my look at your life, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. It has to be culturally competent. It has to be socially competent, and it needs to be handled with such a level of diplomacy that the person understands your actual care for them as an individual, not as a problem, but also knowing that they're the agent here. It's ultimately their choice about whether they want to pursue a chance at something different or not. And you can't make them, as much as it breaks your heart. I speak from my own personal experience. It's just why I'm using these terms.
Yeah.
It's not something that I find very easy.
It is not easy at all. And, you know, like this is my personal belief now that I'm putting into this, right? I understand that studies have been done, researches have been done, and all of this has been done. However, I believe that the way that a community is built, and when I talk about built, I speak about the infrastructure. I speak about the things that people think don't matter, but in my mind, they do matter. So when we look, again, I'm referring to Brownsville, and this is in New York. When I look at these communities that are so-called living in, like, have a lot of people living in poverty, I look at the buildings, the projects, the so-called projects. Everything about the projects is hard. Seeing these big concrete brick structures, that's hard. It just, and it reminds, everything is so rigid. Inside it's concrete, outside it's concrete. There's nothing soft about the environment. There's nothing like that speaks to anything but this harshness. And so, you know, I'm like, maybe if they change the look of the community, maybe people would feel a different way about their community. When you think about coming outside your home and there's a police station thing set up, and then when you go to school, you have to go through a metal detector, and then it's so many interactions with different elements and different subsets of people that really contributes to the mindset of these people. This is like a prison that you're living in. This is how the prison looks. Everything is hard and concrete and grilled up and in the prison system. And this is exactly how these people are living. And, you know, I'm a Jamaican, and I will go back to something that Bob Marley says. Until like we break ourselves out of mental slavery, like it's a real thing. So physically we've been made free, but we are enslaved in so many other ways. You know, so I really think that, like you said, you made a really great point, Christopher, that it's the way that we package something. You know, it's the way that we offer the service to the individual that will make them say, you know what, maybe I can stop and listen to someone raise hand. Denise, you raised your hand.
I wasn't actually going to speak though. I didn't raise my hand, but I was like, I unmuted myself to just chime in a little bit. I think a lot of the points that you guys both discussed really sort of touched home. A lot of the work that we do in HFA is meeting people where they are, sort of like not placing judgment. There's a lot of stigma attached to just poverty in itself, the available programs that are available, because none of it is, you know, 100% great at times. You know, there's barriers to a lot of these federal programs. There's, you know, documentation, there's processes. So when someone doesn't want to accept the help, you might not see the whole picture as to why this person is rejecting this. And while you want to do the best you can, you have to sort of step away and understand that that's someone else's story. I think for us is, like you mentioned earlier, advocating for stronger safety net programs, advocating for it to be easier on those who are experiencing sort of any sort of hardship, because at times it could be any one of us. And some of us, we want to separate or have this line between like, okay, these are the people that are experiencing poverty, but at the flip side, we experience it that any one of us can fall prey to these hardships. So at times it's not placing judgment. It's really tough. It's hard. There's no answer to it. We're living in the richest nation in the world, and we're facing a basic problem like hunger. It's just really disgusting at the end of the day. And I know that everyone's speaking to the choir, because we are in this space because we feel so strongly that there needs to be change. But there are people that are really sort of stuck to the status quo, and that's really challenging to combat.
Yeah. So it's really, it's like, if you're gonna work in an area too, you have to study the community as well. You can't just say, oh, I'm gonna go in here and do work. No, you gotta make acquaintance with the community. People have to get familiar with you so that they get that comfortability that they need in order to start opening up to you. Because if you're a stranger, honestly, like, okay, who are you? I didn't ask you for help. Why are you coming to help me? Who told you? You know, it's like, how dare you? What do you know about me? You know, it's that kind of thing. And one of the ways in which Destiny Helpers has really been able to get into the community and really try to help, we have, like you said, we have put a no judgment. Like, we go into the shelters and people often ask me, like, why would you do that for people in the shelter? And I'm like, okay, they deserve it. They deserve it. They deserve to feel loved. They deserve to feel like someone cares about them, and it's not just me coming to hand you something. Because what Destiny Helpers doesn't do, we don't go into the shelter with food. We don't pre-package the food. If we're giving toys or clothing, we don't say, here, take this. No, that's not our approach, because they didn't ask us for anything. We're offering something. So we go in and we set it up, and you choose. You have that option to take what you want and leave what you don't. You know, we give that people, because the power of choice, when you take away somebody's power of choice, like, that is, you take away everything from them. You take away something very deep from them, you know? So
Trudy, and I think, this has been an incredible conversation, and I really, I put the comment in the chat that I think we should have a second session, to really dive into these conversations and dig deeper. Clearly an hour is not enough. And so we're now 15 minutes over the end of our session. So I did want to just be cognizant of that and people's commitments. And we do have another phone banking session starting right now. So I don't want to cut it abruptly, but I do think, we might want to put a pin in this to have a secondary conversation, continue the conversation, not a secondary comment, continue the conversation, continue the work. I put links in the chat to continue supporting Destiny Helpers Outreach and their mission, connect with them, whether it's digitally, financially, through volunteering. They're doing incredible work on the ground. And it's quite clear that we're quite like-minded around how we can help our communities and lift them up. So I really just want to thank you for the session, and all our participants for really being so honest and really sticking to what we're saying around sharing and being brave and open to learning. So I do want to just kind of close there, and then let Trudy Ann close with any final remarks, and then we're going to close the session. But be on the lookout for future discussions with Destiny Helpers Outreach.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank Hunger Free America for opening this space. This has been a great conversation. I am grateful to everyone who was able to join today. And thank you so much for sharing and being brave, being transparent, and also just being vulnerable in this space and really looking at ways that we can really and truly make a difference in poverty, because it can be ended. It's not impossible. It's very, very attainable, and we just have to keep advocating. That is why I'm emphasizing the advocacy, to talk and to do the service and to provide food from the pantry and to do all of these things. They are great. But what we really need to change is we really need the system to change. We really need the laws of this country to change. We need to open the eyes of every single person that you can open their eyes to say, look, this is the dire situation that our country, the country of the land of the free and the home of the brave and the land of opportunities. This is the dire level of poverty that exists here. We cannot continue to have our families and our children experience this type of life. This ends with this generation. So I am asking all of you, this is a call to action. Support Hunger Free America, support Destiny Helpers, support organizations that are working tirelessly to have these systematic changes put in place so that we can all enjoy a better America where everyone experiences equality and a great quality of life. Thank you all for joining. And like Stephanie said, we will definitely be having more conversations like this.
Thank you all so much. Okay, have a wonderful evening. And I'll see those that are phone banking in just 30 seconds. Okay, thanks again, Trudy Ann, for a wonderful session. And thank you all for joining tonight.